Hey, it's Chris. It's that time of the month. Wait, no, that didn't come out right. It's your favorite video time of the month. The don't buy it at retail. The biggest games, the biggest names coming out to retail in March right now that you probably have your eye on. You probably have been looking at. You may even be clicking and putting it in your cart, but should you actually buy it? Here, as always, I'm going to give you a few points to just sort of think about whether or not you should buy it. And as always, don't do what I do. Don't follow my example. Yeah, that's right. I went there this month. We'll talk about it. Let's go. So first up, you know what? Like I said, Star Wars Unlimited. Star Wars Unlimited released. Star Wars Unlimited released. I have some Star Wars Unlimited. I have some. I have more coming to me, though. And the tricky part here is I kind of want to play it locally. I kind of want to experience that. I've never done that. The only experience is really, I collected a little bit of Magic the Gathering when I was a kid. I got some old Star Wars Decipher TCG style of things, but we collected it more for the cool cards and the rarities rather than anything else. And I didn't collect anything past Bespin, unfortunately, and all the cool stuff was later. But anyway, I digress. Spark of Rebellion, right? The market right now, it's not necessarily the time to buy. And, it was sort of right prior to release. The boxes dipped down. Boxes should be costing you somewhere around like the high 80s, very, very low 90s. A lot of the boxes at the time of me filming this, if you're going to go to some of the bigger places, are going to cost you 100 plus. If you go to your friendly local game store, it's going to cost you 105 to 110. So if you buy a box for 88, where it was at its, low versus that, that's not a huge difference, right? But that's also not insignificant either. And the question again, is this a CCG? And supposedly, they have a good, couple year plan. Who knows after that with FFG, right? Do you want another Star Wars Destinies on your hand? Because that's essentially what you're looking at. Star Wars Armada. Star Wars doesn't have a great track record. Rumor has it, Star Wars the deck building game, which is, sitting over there. It was usually right there. But are we going to see an expansion for that? FFG and Star Wars have done okay. Where's X-Wing? How easy is that stuff to get played? CCG, do you deck construct? I don't. I'm going to be looking up other people's decks. Buy yourself a 2-player starter and see whether you want it. Because that's the big question. You don't have a clue. I don't have a clue. But if you're worried about their follow-up at Gamma from this past weekend, I don't know. It's a club and you're not part of it, right? That's how I feel every time I see those pictures pop up on social media. But they've already announced like the second set, and it's going to be talking a lot into episodes like 7, 8, and maybe 9. Not really a whole lot of details. Some Rey, some Kylo, that's about all we saw. Some official playmats, and we'll just see. I think it's a CCG just like anything else, folks. Don't do what I did. I'm hoping my kids are going to be baited into it and learn how to place this stuff with me, but I don't know. I don't freaking know. The small thing I bought off of someone else for Star Wars Destiny has really gone unplayed, and I don't really want both of them. I don't. Am I going to get it? Yeah, one of my friends from work is also interested. You know who we are. And so we're going to see where that goes. But it's a time suck. It's a money suck. It's a chasing rarities. They've got the 5 different rarity scales or whatever. And people's shinies, foils, and showcases with full arts and all those things that One Piece and Magic is going into. It's just capitalizing on that as well. The leader showcase cards with the full art situations are going for like $200 to $300 to $400 right now for this variation of a card that you don't even need a variation for. It's Pokemon all over again. So that's why it's number 1. But again, don't do what I did. Speaking of, number 2, we'll skip over for a second the other ones that I actually have in my collection already. Don't follow my example, like I said, is Distant Skies Sleeping Gods, the late standalone expansion sequel to the original, right? By all accounts so far, the scores on Board Game Geek are better in small quantities than the original. That's saying something. That is probably, arguably, one of the best campaign games designed. Ryan Laukat, Red Raven Games. They have a type. You have a type. And are you a campaign person? I FOMO'd, folks. I FOMO'd. I have this one. So much for getting away from don't buy it at retail, but that's don't buy it at retail. But I think I'm also going to be out of money, right? You know, with shipping, just at the base level pledge that I got, cost me over $100, cost me $107. You can buy it for 75-ish, and if you throw in a little other smatterings, you can probably get it free shipping. So, you know, as long as you don't buy that, I mean, you could be looking at, you know, $20 difference potentially with shipping, depending on what store online you buy it from. And, you know, there was a little bit of extra content with the campaign. And so with a campaign game as big as this one is, are you asking yourself, is that worth an extra $25-ish with some like miniatures to go along with it? And I don't really know. There's a great question to that. And now it does have overall better ratings, but some of the reviews over on Board Game Geek in the written section are rather scathing. You know, inflexible combat, the rule book still being a challenge, combat being a bore as a whole, the bosses being a joke, rules books just not being polished as well as they would have liked. So again, is that a user error or is that actually issue? Campaign being too long, question mark, was a few people's criticism as well. I don't know. I don't see many campaign games where the campaign being too long was the critical ending, you know, crux of things. But 8 potential story endings, or are you going to go back and play and find other 8 story endings? You know, like Elden Ring. Like people want one ending, they want another. You know, do board games work in the same way? And now, maybe if you're lucky, if you buy someone's retail edition on the secondary market, you could be looking at not even $75. You could be looking at $60 or $65. So now $40 difference from what I've got with the extra that I get a little bit from the crowdfunding campaign. That's not insignificant. That's not insignificant. But again, campaign game, campaign game, campaign game. And do you already have the first one? If you have the first one, it's probably not going to be drastically different, but you probably have a type. So you're probably going to be looking at it from that aspect of things. So the good news is you're going to get it for cheaper. The good news is you're probably not missing out on a ton of content. And so this one might be one of those rare exceptions that you could get it at retail. But again, if you're like me and you're going, holy F balls, Batman, why did I pick up another campaign game? Yeah, hopefully you don't put yourself in that situation. Speaking of things putting yourself in that situation, shortly after this video comes out, I will be having, most likely, maybe slightly before, I don't know when this video ever is going to air, between the time I film it and air it, is going to be Veil of Eternity, right? The sort of sliding under the radar smoothly onto a couple people's lists of best of 2023, which is really getting a Renegade Game Studios wide 2024 release as we speak. And I have a copy. I wanted to take it on my trip with me, but we didn't get it in time. I got it 5 hours at the house after we left. So that was disappointing, but now we've played it, and the player count is going to drastically vary the dynamic of this game. The deck of cards isn't large enough, and from an engine building standpoint, you will probably develop a meta over, you know, half a dozen games or so. Does that encourage you? Does that discourage you? You know, are you looking for the preeminent engine builder? I would argue that still, you know, my tastes overall are going to be a little bit more complex, and Res Arcana is going to meet those needs better. But again, it kind of works. The symbology is appropriate, but the dynamic might not be exactly what you're looking for in this slightly atypical engine builder as a whole, because the number of cards you can have down in front in your engine building is based on the number of the rounds, and the only cards available to you are available to you in a snake draft. So, you know, rotating snake draft at that. Does that intrigue you? Does that behoove you? Does that really just irk you when you're in the middle of that snake draft and the cards that you want are just clearly already taken and there's nothing you can do whatsoever and you're just forced to sell, but there's a limited constraint in how much money you have because you can only hold 4 tokens in the first place? This game is not going to be for everybody. I have mixed feelings on it yet. I need to get a couple more plays in before I really feel one way or the other, but I know why people really might have enjoyed it. I can also see why people really didn't like it. And so, are you willing to take a risk on a lighter style engine build that could be a very well miss as well? Speaking of that, though, other games I have, and I shouldn't have gotten in the same order, Aqua from the OP. Sort of an underwater, hex-based, build-em-up, coral reef style grid that you're doing a la a Cascadia. Again, the question is, with this one, will it be drastic enough from Cascadia? Is it a little bit more complex? Is it a far enough departure that you feel like you could own both of them? Truth be told, I haven't played my copy at the time of me filming this, so I don't freaking know. The aesthetic is wonderful. OP is putting out some serious contendership here, and there are several other bigger channels that have already said, hey, this game's pretty good. But again, pretty good for who? because it's probably not going to be complex enough for you if Cascadia wasn't complex enough for you in the first place. And from another tile laying, sort of drafting-esque mechanism approach, no, not exactly, but stay with me, that is it doing something different enough than the other things that are even remotely somewhat similar in your collection as well? Again, I give credit and kudos to OP. I mean, they're raising their game as a whole. They have an Avatar game or two coming out in the near future as well. So I'm intrigued to see, but maybe this theme is more appropriate for you. But again, the mechanistic might not be. So for a price point, Cascadia is probably going to cost you, 2/3 to half as much. So is the gameplay going to be 1.5 times better than Cascadia? Again, not that it works like that, apples to apples, kiwis to oranges to bananas, but that's another consideration when you're looking at these things as a whole. Next up, again, unfortunately, wow, this is not planned at all, but you know what? I have a copy, because Off the Page Games, I talked about it last year, Harrow County. This is an asymmetric, root style 1 versus 1. You can loop in a third player, but it's going to be dynamically different. There's also a solo mode. But a la Root, you're going to have to learn your asymmetric faction. And although it's not as oriented in that sense, you will still have to know what the other person is capable of. And this is more moving across a grid, manipulating spaces, hexes, tokens, and endgame scoring conditions as you're going along. It is a fantastic freaking game. Mechanically speaking, it may be so far the best game on this list. I don't say that lightly. But again, just like Off the Page's other situations, mind management, it's not a one-size-fits-all. This is very akin to Root in the sense that if you don't know what you're getting yourself into, again, it's not as complex. The mechanisms are more straightforward. But the dynamics between the different phases and the different ways of playing are going to be a little bit more of a learning curve as well. And it's really going to require repeated play over multiple scenarios with multiple characters that you can slightly tweak the asymmetry of both sides to figure out which one is right for you, which side you prefer. Do you like this style of things in the first place? Because I would argue, just like with Root, this isn't going to change your mind. There's nothing in this game that's going to convert you from one of these people who likes this to a different one. It's a fantastic game, right? But as I always say, it has to be right for you. Not well done mechanistically. Like, I'd rather have Star Wars Unlimited at the beginning, a game that is, not maybe mechanically as deep, but I love playing it and my kids love playing it. I get it played, and rather than something else that's not necessarily as easy to get played, that's hard to get to the table, that doesn't, aesthetically or superficially please me as much. And that's okay. And maybe that's where you're willing to spend your money instead for the either or. But that's why it has to be a consideration as a whole. So then we're going to go, again, over to something else that we've heard before, but we're talking about it again. And now 2 games from this company on the same list. The first up, Steamforged. Steamforged is putting out a new edition of Dark Souls. The Sunless City Core. Revamped, revised, completely redone to give you a better Souls experience. And to address, supposedly, some of the criticisms that were weighted in the first place, right? Like too grindy, too long, too just not what people wanted out of a Dark Souls game. And so now they're circling back around years later and they're saying, okay, we've heard it. Here you go. It's next to no information about people that have played it on Board Game Geek. And so the question is, how many of these iterations, how much design improvement is there comparatively? And that's a big question mark. I had an offer for a potential review copy, and I said, I just can't get it played right now. Comparatively to all the other stuff I've got going on, I would be intrigued. I'd be lying to you to say that I wouldn't be intrigued by it. But, I don't know. And so from that aspect of things, right now, with things I just don't have a clue about, I'm too busy otherwise, right? And that's the question I guess I'd pose to you. Are you too busy otherwise as well to take a risk on this? Because again, you're probably going to be buying it new. So that's not an inexpensive thing. I'm guessing it's going to be anywhere upwards $60 to $80. So if you love Souls and you didn't get in the first time, this might be a better entry point as a whole. and maybe use some of the modifications that this takes and pick up some of those expansions cheap on the secondary market. But at the same time, until there's a little bit more known about the nuances of this, you know, I'd be clicking refresh over on the Board Game Geek page to see what it actually entails so you don't go in blind. And so maybe at some point in the future, I'd be happy to explore some of those caves, caverns, or bosses with you. But at the time being, again, it's a little bit of a dice chuck. And if you're like me, it's one thing to think you're going to like something and to just have it be a slight miss. It's another thing to go into it going, well, I don't really know, but let's see. Right? Those are two separate completely things. And I don't know about you, but that doesn't make me comfortable spending that amount of much money on something along those lines. Look, we're just going to continue the bad run of me wanting things and potentially buying them and not listening to my advice in the first place and go with Dune War for Arrakis. If you heard me gripe and complain about it on this channel before, it's because I have been. Because I can't find a Harvester pledge for under like twice the retail price or twice the crowdfunding price as a whole. And the carry-all pledge is going for like, again, like almost 200% on the secondary market, even from all the FLGSs. So, yeah, I mean, it's coming to retail this month with the base core game with all the Kickstarter exclusives. Without all the Kickstarter exclusives, it's going to cost you $110, $115. And the pledge itself was $110, $15 minus the exclusives. So do you need the exclusives? There's lots of extra little models and extra little asymmetry to go along with it. Do you really need it though? I don't know. You know, you may be forced to get the retail because you can't get the crowdfunding. But do you really need it though? No. It's shorter than, say, down here. If we try and pull this up, move the stuff that's there, Veiled Fate rulebooks, and Star Wars Rebellion, or say War of the Ring, the second edition, if you will. But do you really 2-hour gameplay that's going to take you half an hour, 30 to 40 minutes to teach it in the first place? You know, it doesn't have the setup and teardown of War of the Ring, but you know, it has a little bit different units, a little bit different dynamic. And if you're one of the 3 people on Board Game Geek forums who says, I've played Star Wars Rebellion and War of the Rings 3,700 times, and I'm an aficionado metagaming player, and the balance for War of Arrakis is clearly out of scale, so it's 53 to 47 instead of a true 50 to 50, well, then it might not be for you. But apart from that, again, the reviews on it are actually surprisingly good. So I'm going to eat a little crow on this one as well, because when that campaign went live, I said, there's no way that they're going to do a good job with this comparatively. I'm eating crow. You know what? I'll be the first one to fall on my sword, and if it's my fault or I'm screwing up, right? All the longtime viewers are like, oh yeah, he screws up a lot. Oh yeah, they're getting ready to type in the comment section how much I screw up and which thing I mispronounced or which verb or adjective I forgot in this video as a whole. But I really want to trade for it too, and just nobody's still trading for it. Nobody's, you know, getting rid of it on the secondary market, and that's actually a good sign. But getting it at retail, I don't know. The 2 other expansions are fine. I've heard people say if you really, really want a little more, but you don't need another 2-player, 2-hour asymmetric dueler meta style in the lines of Star Wars Rebellion or War of the Ring. I mean, if the theme doesn't do it for you, you're better off with one of the other 2. That's more proven. That's more long-term proven as well. Because, you know, again, as the Dune hotness going on right now with the release of Dune 2, that's what you're seeing. So you're going to pay a pretty penny to get all the pretties to go along with it. And are you willing to do that? Probably not. And that's probably not a good idea as a whole. And again, the last game on this list that I am desperately trying to acquire when it comes out, supposedly, maybe question mark this month, is Evenfall. The other one, just like Veil of Eternity, that snuck onto a lot of people's lists, or people who had access to his lists from Essen in 2023. The battle for the Enchanted Throne as a hand management, multi-use, variable power driven engine building game. Again, more complicated than Veil of Eternia, and so I'm kind of looking at it like that. By the way, if Veil of Eternia gets an expansion with more cards, I can easily put that one way back up on the list of 2024's top games, right? That would be amazing. Anyway, I'm already talking about a game that's coming out at retail that needs an expansion. I hate that, though. The dynamics of this game, though, I think are going to be obviously more complicated. The question just, though, is, just like with Veil of Eternity, engine building, right? You're going to be doing this over 4 phases, 3 rounds. Is it going to be enough? Is it going to be too much? Is it going to be too little? You know, engines are tricky because you want them to ramp up, but you don't want them to last too long. You don't want them to be anticlimactically short. Is this one going to have the fine tuning? You know, like I just said with Veil of Eternity, right? It needs more cards. That's the asymmetric randomness, non-meta gaming. that you need, right? Like a Millennium Blades, where there's just too many crazy different combinations, so no game or no combination is going to be the same thing. And same with Res Arcana in that sense, where you don't use all of the cards every single game. You know, Veil of Eternity, I didn't mention this, but you go through all of the cards in a 4-player game more than once. You get through the whole deck, and that's not a great sign for an engine builder as a whole. So does that bother you? Does the unknown of this game, because this is probably the biggest unknown on this list in terms of wide availability that people just don't have a clue about. You know, this is probably the second most unknown comparatively to Dark Souls, but at least with Dark Souls Iteration 1, you have some baseline. The great thing is with some of the reviews that are out there, I mean, there's like 9 reviews over on Board Game Geek at the time of you doing this, but this is, again, it's going to be a little bit of an import game, like Matago and a few of the other companies that are bringing it over. It's going to be a pricier price point. So comparatively, again, engine build stand the test of time, Res Arcana plus 2 expansions, or Evenfall. Are you willing to pay a premium to get a better product to the table for you? I mean, we can make that similar comparison to Star Wars Rebellion and War of the Ring versus Dune, right? If you can't play War of the Ring because it's a little bit too long, it's a little bit too much teardown, setup, and explanation, are you willing to pay double the price for an hour's left game time and 20 minutes less pickup, teardown, and setup individually speaking for all of those things? Double the price. Again, I said this during last month's video as well too. Where is that line, that balance, that yin and that yang, that Venn diagram overlapping if I'm willing to pay more to get it easier to the table? And engine builders are a tricky dynamic. They remind me of Euros, worker placements, right? In the sense that which aspects of those elements, even though by a mechanistic approach they're all called the same, are really going to appeal to you as a whole. And with this only going 3 rounds, and supposedly per reviews, heavier, maybe it does fit a niche. But again, maybe on the opposite side, you know, we've sort of got Goldilocks and the 3 engine builders, if you will, right? Veil of Eternity too light, Evenfall too heavy, Res Arcana just in the middle. I don't know, question mark. I'm just saying, where are you along that gamut? Because this one might fit perfectly, but it also might be one or the other, a little bit too hot, too cold, or too lukewarm. Just kidding about that Steamforged thing going back to back, but there are 2 Steamforged games on this list because the other one that's coming straight from crowdfunding as opposed to their retail side of things is the other video game IP that they are delivering, RuneScape. The classic take on the video game on the tabletop now. Again, like you've heard that several times with Steamforged. And again, as someone who has no nostalgia for this game whatsoever, I look at this as a 1 to 5 player cooperative dice chucking dungeon crawl-esque game and go chapters in a book and exploration boss phase situations. It's not necessarily going to be the variety or maybe a little bit too much of the grindiness that you saw in RuneScape in the first place. It's going to be very simple to set up per what people have said, rulebook wise oriented, and mechanically speaking. It's going to be easy enough to, well, do a single playthrough, but the main criticism right now is it's not necessarily terribly RuneScape-esque if that's what you were really, really diving in for. And the events and the shuffling of the decks, they say, really maybe doesn't have as quite much replayability. Gives me more of like a Destiny's vibe. Like once you know what's going on, you can replay it, right? But is it going to give you that same rush and that same feeling as the first time you play it? And there are just some concerns about the loop being just simpler, that you may not get the full depth of what you want if you're looking for something uniquely different and uniquely engaging a little bit on the more, I don't want to say complicated side, but just more than your entry-level style of things. And again, I think that's what they were going for. So I'm not sure that that's, full criticism, but just more realization of what this is. Easy to play, but it's going to be expensive with the IP. They're going to have great miniatures because it's Steamforged, but the gameplay mechanics as a whole aren't going to be necessarily as the most intuitive, most inventive of the dungeon crawls that are out there. Do you want something, again, that's going to be easier overhead? That's my debate right now with Marvel Zombies. I was literally just debating about whether or not I'm going to sell that game before filming this video. And I said, I really kind of want to get rid of it. And I really kind of want to explore the depths even further to make sure. At the same time, I don't have the time, wherewithal, bandwidth, or space anymore to do so. And it would help pay for my Star Wars Unlimited at the beginning of this video that I mentioned. So that's my dilemma, and that's your dilemma with this one. Obviously, with the other side of things with Steamforged, they have stayed pretty true track record wise of this being more expensive on the secondary market and not being widely available outside of their eShop than on crowdfunding in the first place. Stayed true with the Resident Evils, that stayed true with the Dark Souls, when they went with expansion wise, the Devil May Cries, Monster Hunter in addition. So yeah, you might not. I mean, it came with like 4 expansions along with it, and so it's a lot of money, especially picking up with the secondary retail price if you don't know what you're in for. So this one might be a better try before you buy or trade, because that's going to save you more money than actually buying at retail, opposite what we saw at the beginning of the video with Sleeping Gods, which, again, was sort of a surprise for me, sort of not. I haven't seen the incentive necessarily with some of those companies, as much as Garfield and Red Raven, who do more of the slight deluxifications, back us because we're indie crowdfunding, rather than saving a ton of money. And again, your mileage may vary, but that's at least food for thought more than anything else. Then we have a couple of more here that end. Astronauts, the latest expansion, the reiteration, space, sci-fi, fantasy of Aeon's End, with the expansion called Eternity, and more narrative-driven in this case. So you're right. Like, if you like deck building, this is getting good ratings. Overall, better ratings. We'll talk about the N, the sample size, that being very small, though, of 125 right now on Board Game Geek. So you have to look at this and go, it sort of reminds me of some of the other iterations we've seen subsequently, right? Where the only people that are buying it and rating it are people that really probably bought it and wanted to like it in the first place, or were the crowd that were going to like it automatically. And, or I don't want to say that, but the crowd that were more predisposed to liking it, right, will be, try and be a little bit more fair and balanced. So the question just is, you're getting new mechanics, you're getting a narrative campaign, and you're getting something slightly different, which, again, mechanically speaking, people say is slightly better overall with some of the tweaks of the bosses and the overall mechanic comparatively to Aeon's End. But if you're in a situation like me and you're saturated with Aeon's End, and you're almost tempted not to buy this, the FOMO is real from the opposite side of things, because I don't want to like it. Because then what am I going to do? I'm going to be forced to look at myself in the mirror and say, what am I doing with Aeon's End now, right? Like, I have a Marvel Legendary, like, half a dozen expansions with that I picked up on the secondary market. Like, it was a great price. But when was the last time I played that with the kids, right? So what am I doing with it? Nothing right now. Star Wars Destiny, mentioned it earlier. Nothing. Just too much of that. And so that's what I worry about with this, is that one of those is definitely going to phase out the other. And I'm so far into Aeon's End, and you might be too if you're looking at this at all like me. I mean, if you don't have anything from a deck building standpoint, this might be a great place to start if you like the non-shuffling, very strategic, deterministic style of things. And getting rid of some of the weaknesses. But the other problem is, if you're owning the other original Astronauts as well, is that indie board and cards has really done the irking thing with all of these campaigns, is they make them all standalone. So you end up with some price point where you're just paying for more than what you actually want in the first place as well. So do you mind? That's the big criticism of Aeon's End. I have like 16 copies of Gravehold and the dials that go along with that, and those sorts of basic generic things, because every game box has them. And if I'm going to criticize Cascadia Landmarks for throwing in the 5 to 6 player expansion with the new content that I wanted, and saying that I wasn't happy with that, I have to also say that indie board and card, I wish you would sometimes treat your returning folks as well as you treat your new folks, because it's always the new product guaranteed more. It's always the new product marketed towards getting new people in, rather than necessarily retaining as much of your customer base and appeasing them. And that's a tricky balance, I know. And I don't throw shade at them in that sense, but they've definitely leaned all the way one way and not really nearly as much the other with any of the new expansions for either content. And so eventually, I mean, I can't speak to people's backings or reasonings why or why not, right? But the Aeon Trespass Odyssey ones have not been raising overall as much, I would argue, probably as they did when they came out. Again, novelty. Again, it's like when Michael Jordan wins 3 MVPs in a row, or Steve Nash wins 2 in a row, and then they finally just decide, or LeBron James wins a couple in a row, and they decide, not because he wasn't the best player, but people are just kind of sick of how good he was, actually, or they were. And so they vote for somebody else instead. Not that they were actually better, but the perception, again, changes. And I don't know if that's something like this that's happening with Aeon, Trespass, Odyssey, and Astronites, and why Astronites really hasn't struck the fine harpsichord combination of melody that Aeon's End did in terms of opening up people's wallets. But you tell me why. You tell me why in the comment section, because I don't have a clue on this one. Because in theory, like, again, this is one I should be all over. This one should be in my collection already. This one should have been backed on crowdfunding, and I just couldn't. So, right? Then 2 more here at the end, and these are more for you heavy gamers, if you have any interest in that. Well, slightly heavier game overall. At late Essen release, just getting over into North America now at this time. Rats of Wistar as a 1 to 4 player worker placement with variable start setup as you're playing a rat who's trying to escape from a lab. And so you have to lead the family, you have to be most deserving to help out the entire colony using skills to explore the pantry, to get your food, get your inventions, and, well, escape by digging new rooms and building new beds. Theme is absolutely engaging and intriguing. But selection wheel and wheel spinning that goes along with it, do you feel the need for a worker placement game like this? Does the mechanic hold up? Because as much as these big name Essen sort of worker placement games have been released over the past couple years, my go-to, honestly, because it's been relatively true, is that many of them, the hypedest ones from the big conventions, haven't done as well in the last 2 or 3 years. And not necessarily they've been bad games, but comparatively wise, right? And which are the ones that stand the test of time? Which are the ones that you go, okay, this one really, really is doing that for me versus the other heavier-ish worker placements that you have? There is some luck. There's more mitigation in terms of that spinning and exploration and card draw that are apparently serving more of a thematic incorporation to balance out the 6 main actions that you're using from a strategic worker placement Euro aspect. Is it enough for you as well, with some potential take that, to turn you off? Plus, a lot of people who are looking at the scaling of the 3 to 3.5 weight on Board Game Geek, you know, I would argue that a lot of people are looking for less take that, more strategy, more I'm outplaying you, outmaneuvering you. And, you know, theme isn't always the thing you're looking most for, right? I'm looking for mechanics, and I would argue that most of them are too. It's sort of like me for Lacerdas. Like, which Lacerda? I don't have a clue. I'm sure someone can give you a more detailed response and nuanced answer, but that's sort of like this one as well. Like, clearly some well-defined, different tableau building with the worker placement. Did you actually weigh in for it without trying it? Again, as a worker placement person, if you're using that similar mechanism in a lot of your games, try it out and see what you think. Again, the difference between me trying out and buying Aeon's End versus Astronites at this point. Last up, Salton C. Devir's latest, also heavier, the heaviest game on this list with nearly a 4 rating on Board Game Geek. You're extracting and brining geothermally the salt from the water. So again, thematic incorporation, something completely different. Worker placement, again, very heavy. In the lines of Devir's other heavier offerings, Jerusalem behind me, as well as even, say, a Batoku or those similar ilk, a 2 to 3 hour worker placement Euro game. Devir puts out a very solid product. Devir probably has some of the better, most consistent Euro games of the last couple years at retail. But again, the question goes back, just like with Rats of Wistar, Lacerda. Which one is right for you? All of these are different enough. And does theme start to make a difference for you? The religious one, the fantastical Eastern theme, the geothermal, environmental. Is that the make it or break it nowadays for you? And with the price point of all of these rising and, getting $40, $50 plus for the retail side of the Euros, is that something that you want to get into? Do you have enough time? If all of these are going to take you, Wistar or this one, 2 to 3 hours to play. I mean, that's the blessing, curse, even sometimes of a zombie side or a RuneScape, right? Like if you can one-off a scenario in 45 minutes, you can't necessarily in zombies. You know what I'm talking about, though. They tend to be lighter in addition. Benefit of Veil of Eternity, right? You can play that 3 times in a row. We played the latest from Pandasaurus, Courtesans, the other night, 3 times in half an hour with my 8-year-old. So there's something to be said of that when you're spending the whole game night learning, teaching, playing, only to get halfway grasping under your belt. in a game like this, which really requires repeated grinding, a la your other Dunes, War for Arrakis, Rebellions, War of the Rings, right? Where, you know, playing it and allocating it once is one thing. But if you have this, when is the second time you're going to get around to it? When is the third time you're going to get around to it? When is the fourth time you're going to get around to it? That's what you have to ask yourself. And does the thematic incorporation with a mechanistic approach really matter to you with these or not? So, bottom line, gameplay it, video it, and see what you think. But, sorry, Euro games, not my strong suit, ending on my weakest point. Great way to end a video, Chris. Great way to get subscribers and get yourself closer to 10,000. So anyway, that's all I got. Too much, right? You think I'm joking here? Here's Aqua right here, folks. So that's it. That's all I got. Have a great freaking fantastic day. As always, let me know how wrong I am in the comment section down below. Subscribe this, help me hit 10K. Somehow last month I got, you know, this is gonna surprise people. Maybe it's not. Like, I have a small channel, right? I talk about a bunch of crap. I'm not very popular. I'm not in the club, as they say, right? George Carlin, if you remember him, you know, his famous quote is, there's a club and you're not part of it, right? I kind of feel like that at times with the social media and the convention circuit that goes on. Because I mean, right, like a lot of people who are on that are like doing this full time, or, you know, just, you know, like you know them by their first name, right? I don't even need to say names. And when I think about it from that aspect of things, it's a little bit weird because I got 97,000 views on my channel last month. 97,000. So just a hair shy of 100K on a channel with less than 10,000 subscribers. And that doesn't sound like a lot, you know. My kids watch YouTube Minecraft videos. They get like 1 million views in less than a day or two. And so like comparatively, it's whatever, right? And I earned like $200 last month, essentially, for this, right? $200. But like 230 subscribers. Right? That just dichotomy. So the people who like me, you guys who like me, you really like me, and I really appreciate that. We just got to get you to get some friends to like me as well. So spread the word, make me go viral. I've never had a video on the Board Game Geek page of like highlighted or anything along those lines, or thumbed near the top on the front page. I would love to have one of these videos hit that style of things too. So in case you didn't know, I actually through all of this, I'm trying to be better about throwing them on the Board Game Geek blog that I have as well. So I'll put that link down in the description below. So you can go over there and thumb that. And maybe I'll start prompting that so we can get me on the front page and do that way. Because, you know, super heavy Board Game. No, I don't know. Do people actually watch this off of Board Game Geek? I know there's like 100 of you. Because the blog on Board Game Geek actually tells you how many subscribers you have too. So I've got like 100 subscribers on the Board Game Geek blog. So I personally, I think that's freaking fantastic, right? I don't know. You know who you are, though. I got some frequent commenters on the Board Game Geek blog, too. I see you guys. You guys know I comment there pretty well, too. That's all I got. Have a great day. Stay classy. My car's in the shop. Man, it was a rough start this morning. See you around. Sergio! A la your other Dunes of Arrakis. A la your other Dunes of Sergio!